Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dungeon Dive. Daniel here, and I hope you are doing well. If you're not, I hope you are soon. Today, we are going to be taking a look at Arcadia Tenebra. This is a prototype game, and I was asked if I wanted to take a look at this game because it is going to be hitting Kickstarter in May of 2022. This is a game that was on Kickstarter before, but it failed to fund, so they're trying again. I agreed to look at the game because I thought the prototype looked nice. There are enough elements for me to show you something interesting. And I think the game is doing some interesting things, even though I do have some concerns about it. So in this video, I'm going to do a quick overview of kind of how the game plays, what you can expect from the game, and then I'm going to list some things that I like, and I'm going to list some concerns that I have. Some of those concerns are more personal things where I would like the game to be developed more in a certain direction from my personal taste. Some of the concerns are a little more universal, you could say. But overall, I think this game is doing some interesting things. If you are a fan of A Touch of Evil, you will probably want to pay attention to this game because I think it lives in that same space, but there's not a ton of overlap. And so I think the games, if you like A Touch of Evil, you could easily add this to your collection and be happy with it. So Arcadia Tenebra is a game like A Touch of Evil where you are kind of trying to solve a mystery, some kind of supernatural mystery. In the case here, you are going to be playing characters and you are going to be exploring this world that is kind of an Eastern European world filled with folklore and kind of steampunk elements. And you are trying to solve a mystery, kind of prevent a serial killer from striking again, that kind of thing. However, like A Touch of Evil, this is not a game that is like Clue. At the beginning of the game, you are not going to take a certain character, put him or her in an envelope, and then that's the mystery that you are trying to solve. You're not really concerned about solving the mystery. The mystery is just a backdrop. It is a story. It is a way to propel the action and the adventure that happens in the game. Throughout the story, you will be solving the mystery, but you will be solving it by doing adventure game elements, not logic things where you are actually concerned with who committed the crimes. But in the game, you are going to be taking a number of characters. You can play solo and you can play competitively. I believe there's also a way to play, I think, teams or maybe cooperatively. But the main focus of the game is you are going to be competing to see who can find 3 clues first, and then present those clues to the town sheriff, the chief of police who is in this town here, who's in the main city. And then once you get those clues, you will kind of go into the in-game phase where there's a nice little twist, and then you have to do a couple more quests in order to solve the mystery and win the game. But the characters are people like Ricardo Morin, Hilda von Blunstein, Nikola Tesla, Coco Kinski, Jabir Ibn Yazio, Mara, Delara Tilke, Broken Ivan. I really like the drawing there of Broken Ivan, and Aiden Bahur and Klaus Corey. So these are the characters I am playing. I've played the game twice as solo. It's just one character. The character I am playing right now is this gentleman here, and his name is Askir Uzunoglu. Sorry about the pronunciation there. But you are going to be taking that character, your character. You're going to be starting in the city here, and you're going to be moving from region to region. And as you enter a new unexplored region, you are going to be faced with a series of challenges at each of those regions. And the different challenges are laid out in the book here. You have different kinds of elements that you can interact with on the tile. You can get healing. Maybe you can find a companion. There are combat challenges where you might have to face a certain number of monsters, usually 1 or 2, depending on a die roll. And they will be also further delineated by difficulty of a level 1 or level 2 monster. Sometimes you will have a boss fight Then you will have challenges such as charisma challenges and intelligence challenges. You will also have an opportunity to shop, and I do really like the way that this shopping, the things available to buy are actually all of the items that have been discarded throughout the game. So that's kind of a cool element. And then sometimes on certain spaces where they have these book symbols, you will go to the leads book and you will read a little story about an NPC, maybe Tesla, or maybe this guy here at Sawmill. Then you can, you have the bartender here at the Wolf's Head Inn, and you will read a little story about them, and then it'll give you a choice of how you want to interact with that NPC. It's usually a charisma check or an intelligence check, or sometimes some kind of an intimidation check. You can maybe he has you can pick his pocket or lock pick a safe. There are a number of different ways to interact with the NPCs. And if you succeed in interacting with an NPC, you are usually going to be rewarded with a clue. And the first player to get 3 clues and take those clues back to the chief of police here in the city will be able to progress to the end game. And the clues, there are different kinds of clues, and those are shown by these symbols at the top. You want to collect 3 different ones, or if you collect a set of these same kind of clue, then you can bypass a certain part of the game and kind of take a shortcut to the end game. So there are a couple of ways to reach the end game, depending on how you want to collect your clues. So while you are out there exploring and adventuring throughout the land, you're going to be faced with a number of encounters. And you have charisma encounters, intelligence encounters, and creatures. The creatures you are going to be fighting are mostly mundane until you come across this certain point in the game where you're going to cross the border into a more supernatural element. And at that instance, you will be encountering creatures and events that are a little more mysterious, a little more otherworldly, such as some fairies and some wraiths and that kind of thing. So the game does have this nice little twist where you think you're in one kind of game and then maybe you end up in another type of game. But the charisma and intelligence encounters are mostly kind of story-based encounters where you're going to be reading a little paragraph and then you will have to make a choice. And you will usually have to pass a charisma or an intelligence check. And if you do, then good things happen. If you don't, bad things happen. So there are quite a few of those. And then the intelligence ones are the same, but you will be using your intelligence stat. And then the creatures that you will be fighting, when you fight a creature, you will take a creature board like this, and you will put the creature on there. And then you will use these different bars here to keep track of the creature's stats. So in a little ways, it is kind of like Dark Venture here, which the creatures get set up on little boards. So it is helpful to keep track of their stats. And when you do combat, you will have a number of different stats on each character that will determine their abilities in combat, such as how many attacks they can make on a turn, the bonuses they add to any of their combat rolls, their hardiness, how hard they are to hit, and then how much damage they do. And then you also have a number of different, each character has a couple of different weapon types that they are proficient in, which also give them more bonuses. And then your other stats are power, which is basically your hit points. And then you have your intelligence and your charisma. And so you're going to be moving from one section to another while you are playing. Every time you pass a challenge, you get to draw a good card from the lucky deck. And there are a whole bunch of cool things to look at. We will look at these more detail in just a bit after this quick overview. And anytime you fail a challenge, you have to draw an item from the unluckies deck. Now, these aren't all actually like most of them are somewhat bad, but these aren't all just like terrible. These aren't like something really bad you would draw in Arkham Horror or Eldritch Horror. Some of these have some good elements mixed with some bad. It's usually kind of like a monkey wrench, something that's thrown in the path of your character that you have to overcome. And I do kind of like this element. It's really cool. Same with the Lucky's deck, which we will look at that in a little later. But as you are exploring, you really want to go to these spaces that have these book symbols because you want to read the leads here. You want to interact with the NPCs because that is the way you get your clues. You want to find your clues, take them back to the chief of police, and then progress into the end game. And you want to do that all within a certain amount of turns before the blood moon rises. And after each turn, you're going to slowly reveal more of the blood moon until the blood moon has risen. And then the thing that is doing all of the murder, well, they are going to strike again, and that is game over. So that is a really brief overview of the game. As you can see, it is kind of like a Touch of Evil. It has those kind of standard adventure game elements, moving around a map. I think the map does look very nice. This is one of the reasons why I did want to take a look at this game, because whenever I take a look at a prototype or something that isn't quite available yet, I do want something that looks interesting because it does kind of give you an idea of the flavor, of the theme, and how the game is going to play. So I think everything actually looks pretty nice for a prototype game, and that is why I wanted to take a look at it. So here are some of the things that I really do enjoy about the game. And that is, it is a strong thematic game. I like the way that the story elements are woven throughout all of the different pieces of the game. And that goes into your items. Some of the items you draw will actually, some of the luckies you draw will actually be events. And they will have a cool little story that you have to read. And then you have to do some kind of check in order to pass that event. Sometimes you will draw items that are actually quests. And these quests will tell you to go to a certain area. Then you will read this little story. You will pass a test. And then you will get the item that's on the bottom of the quest. I really like that a lot. That is really cool. You're not just drawing a new item to upgrade your character. You might be drawing a little story that you will have to undergo, in a little quest that you will have to pass in order to add that item to your character. That is a really neat idea. The same thing goes for the Unlucky's deck. The Unlucky's deck, you might come up across items that you have to put on that are going to, sometimes they will boost a certain ability, or they will negate, or they will cause a certain ability to go down. So you never actually know. Sometimes the Unluckies are half good, half bad. One of the cool ones that I recently got on my character here was this oak skin. And it made me kind of slower, but also made me harder to hit. And I can't remove this until I go on this quest where I could have to go down here to the spring and soak in the spring in order to remove this kind of cursed piece of gear. This is a really cool element that I wish more games had, where you have these items, and they're not just items that boost your stats, but they are items that add a little bit of story to your character. And if they are these kind of cursed items, well, then they add a little quest that you can go, which might force you to go somewhere on the map that maybe you would not have gone to if you had not received that curse. So these two decks, I think, are a lot of fun, and I am incredibly interested to see what the more events and more things that they add to the game. So you can get companions like a falcon. You can have a turtle as a charm there, as a trinket. There are all kinds of different weapons. There are bladed weapons and ranged weapons. There are kind of weird weapons, an alien blaster. It is kind of steampunky, Tesla punk, that kind of thing. So there is some sci-fi elements that are pretty cool. Speaking of that, at a certain point in the game, when you come up to Tesla's laboratory up here, you can pass a quest for Tesla, and then you can start gaining access to all of these like really kind of outlandish and wild weapons and items. So you can trade with Tesla to get even more powerful kinds of cards, kinds of gear. And in addition to that, there are also ways where you can change your character's class by getting these special cards, by collecting these sets of cards that you might become a guardian or a Petra or a divine beauty. And once you get a certain number of these cards and you combine them to become that other kind of character, then you will play that character for the rest of the game. So as you can see, like the theme and all of the theme is really woven into all of the different components. You're not just reading story from the Leeds book. Everything has a little bit of story to it. There's lots of cool loot and events. I think it plays pretty quickly. If you remember my top 50, I talked quite a bit about one of the main negatives about so many of these games is that they are very long. This game is kind of breezy. I was moving through it at a pretty good clip. That could be a negative, and we'll talk about that when I get to my concerns about the game. And I think finally, one of the things I like are the different characters. However, this is a little bit of a double-edged sword here. The characters are interesting. They all have different innate abilities, like her trigger happy, burglar, connections at court, an investigator, aggressive, alcophile, a spook, or Tesla might be cunning, or you know where it hurts, self-injuring. And all of these are kind of, they have powers that maybe break the rules a little bit. Each one of them also has a somewhat interesting backstory with a description of their appearance, of their personality, and their religion and spirituality, that is not something I see in very many of these kinds of games. A direct examination of a character's religion and spirituality. None of these things really have any kind of gameplay mechanic or any kind of change to the gameplay. But if you play this game kind of as an RPG in a box, if you want to role play a little bit, then these could give you a little bit of direction to do that. One of my complaints about the characters is all of the women seem to be wearing like these kind of like booby shirts, and it would just be nice to maybe have at least one of the women not not have that going on. I guess there is Aiden Klaus here, who is an androgynous character, and she can kind of change their appearance to be more feminine or more masculine as a part of their character's abilities. But even here, that does mention that as part of her appearance that she has small breasts. So I don't know. It's just a little weird. I could see some women gamers just wanting to have maybe women characters that are more fully clothed, let's say. But that's a pretty minor complaint overall, because I do think that the characters are interesting. They have interesting backstories, and I do admire that religious spirituality description of some of the characters. It does give them a little more personality. So that's pretty cool. So let's talk about some concerns I have. Some of these concerns are more for me personally, where I would like to see the game go, so I would enjoy it more. Some of them are a little more universal. So perhaps take these with a grain of salt. These are maybe just kind of things that I would like the designer or the developer to think about as they are going in to this next campaign, Kickstarter campaign, and then they're going to have some time to further develop the game before it gets released. One thing straight out of the gate, and this is something I hardly ever complain about in games, because I'm a terrible gamer. I suck at games. Everybody knows that. But I think this game might be too easy. There was hardly any time when I was playing the game where I felt like I was up against a wall. It lacks a little bit of tension. Now, you can create tension by giving yourself fewer turns to come to the conclusion of the game, to beat the game. But I don't like when when that is the sole purpose of a timer, when it's just to make the game harder. What I would have liked to have seen are more elements that interrupt your path, more monkey wrenches to get thrown in your plans, because there's never really a point where you are going from one territory to the next where things are going to waylay you, or to distract you, or to stop you in your path where you have to face something you get ambushed or you face something that you're not ready for. Every time you go to a certain location, you're going to get a certain number of choices that you can make to where you want to have, you will usually have the ability to have like a charisma check, an intelligence check, or a combat check. So you have three of those choices. You're almost always going to pick the choice where your character is best in. And so that is good because, you're not going to get, beaten down just because your character isn't good at combat. But when you have that choice, you're almost always going to pick the easy way out. I would like to see some kind of mechanism on the board where maybe there are creatures, or maybe there is a group of bandits, or some things that roam around the map that could disrupt your strategy, could disrupt your planning, where like you want to plan to go up to the fields, so you plan your route, and then maybe you're ambushed by something, or if you're if you're on some kind of a horse, maybe your horse gets sick. I don't know, just something to throw some gunk into the machinations to add a little bit of tension. A big concern I have is the rule book. It is somewhat poorly organized, and it's pretty long. There's a lot going on in this game, and it is one of those games where you read the rules and you think you have a good understanding of what is going on, and then you sit down to play the game and you're just kind of, oh wait, what do I do now? And so then you have to go back to the rule book, and it's just a little unclear. It's a little poorly organized. They are working on rewriting the rulebook, making it more clear and better organized. So hopefully that comes to fruition. The main concern I have with the rulebook is that it needs to explain more clearly what constitutes a single turn, what you can do, what you can't do, what choices you make. Do they block other things that you can do? It's a little unclear of what you can do from turn to turn. And I think there also is maybe an element of English not being the designer's first language. And so there are some translation issues. There are some very awkwardly written sentences, and poor grammar or punctuation, that kind of stuff. So I am also hoping that we get a good editor to go through the rulebook and clean it up, because this game does focus on its story, its theme, and its atmosphere, and it builds a lot of that through the words. The words need to be really well written. They need to be clear. The language needs to be evocative. The language needs to be concise. And it needs to create that atmosphere. And when you're struggling to determine what is actually being said, that can actually pull you out of the experience. It definitely does need more encounters, and I have a feeling that this is just a byproduct of this being a prototype. The deck of charisma and intelligence encounters is pretty small. So I'm hoping there would be a lot more of these, because as you play the game, you are going to be seeing these repeated. I don't want to see these repeated too often. And ultimately, I think the main concern I have, and that might be alleviated by what I'll end this video with, and that is because you are just working through this book, and you will be encountering most of the same NPCs from one game to the next. I'm wondering how familiar each game is going to be, if there is going to be enough variety where people are going to want to play the game multiple times. It seems like a game that you could easily just kind of get railroaded into always doing the same things, because you end up knowing exactly what you need to do in order to progress through the story and to win in an optimal manner. So one of the things that they are introducing, and I don't have any of those examples with me, and I'm very curious about how they're going to implement these, and it could completely alleviate that last concern I have with the game. And those are two things that they're calling tasks and investigations. Tasks are kind of personal quests that will be assigned to characters at the beginning of the game, quests that you have to solve while you are playing the game. So that could be something where they add a nice little layer on top of the main quest in the game, which the main quest could become a little rote, a little stale as you play through the game multiple times because you know it. However, to augment that with a personal quest for each of the characters, and hopefully there is a variety of those, that could add a nice little layer, a nice little system to the game. Another thing that they're going to implement is a thing called investigations. And investigations are kind of whole scenario-based choose your own adventure system that you can play through. And these are going to be PDFs or web apps that will have choices that you can make. It's not a app-driven game. Just instead of having a book, you will be reading from a PDF or from a web page where you can click on the choices you make and it'll take you to the next page, the next story, the next chapter, the next part of that scenario. And some of those scenarios will be fully focused on solo play, where you will take one character through a story-based scenario that will kind of overlay systems of on top of the game. And I believe that other investigations will be more competitive based, or maybe cooperative or team based. So depending on how they implement those two things, it could add enough variety to where the game really does shine in that adventure game arena, where we want a lot of variety to the game so we can play it multiple times. And maybe we're having the same kind of experience. You know, like a game like Talisman, you're always working towards the same goal to get into the center, but it's all that variety that happens while you're getting there. And this game needs that. It especially needs that because of the nature of the main focus of the game is that murder mystery and interacting with the NPCs. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed taking a look at Arcadia Tenebra. Pay attention to Kickstarter if this sounded interesting to you. I'm really curious to see how they have more fully developed the game from the time that this prototype was made, and I'm really interested to see how they implement those tasks and those investigation elements into the game. So, all right, guys, well, I hope you enjoyed this video. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.